It really was fun. I tell people, I say I like the 18 for two reasons. One, they paid me a lot of money. Two, we always had a plan.
Since 1983, the A-Team has been loved for its action, its humor, and its unforgettable cast. But what really happened behind the scenes, on set, away from the cameras? For years, nobody knew the full truth. Now, the cast is finally ready to reveal what really took place while the world was watching something completely different. What really happened between the biggest stars of the A-Team? And what secrets did the set hide for over 4 decades? Join us as we go back in time to uncover what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. The 4 men who were never supposed to become heroes. Before the A-Team became a television legend, they were supposed to be criminals on the run. The story begins with 4 highly trained soldiers from the Vietnam War. These men, reports say, were accused of a crime they did not commit. Nobody gave them a fair trial, and nobody wanted to hear their side of the story. So they did the only thing they could do. They escaped from military custody and vanished into the shadows. Now, according to the legend built around them, they live as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, and no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team. But the real mystery is not about their fictional crime. The real mystery is how this strange, unlikely idea became one of the biggest television hits of the 1980s. How writers Stephen J. Cannell and Frank Lupo reportedly built this world from scratch. Why did mixing military action with comedy and larger-than-life characters felt like nothing else on television at the time? Then, meet the 4 men who would become the heart of the phenomenon. Hannibal was the brilliant leader, always calm, always 10 steps ahead. Face was the smooth operator, the man who could talk his way into anything. Murdoch was the unpredictable pilot, equal parts genius and chaos. And B.A. Baracus was the muscle, feared by enemies and loved by fans. 4 different men, 4 different talents, and somehow one unstoppable team. But one question would soon become impossible for the network, the producers, and even the actors themselves to ignore. What happens when 4 fictional characters become bigger than the very show that created them? Because behind the scenes, allegedly, a quiet rivalry was already beginning to grow. And it started with a Hollywood veteran who was not ready to share the spotlight. The Hollywood star who wasn't expected to share the spotlight. George Peppard was already a major Hollywood name long before the A-Team ever aired. He was not some unknown actor hoping for a lucky break. He had already built a real career in movies, reportedly working alongside some of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the time. He knew what it meant to be the center of attention. Then came the role of Hannibal Smith. Peppard became the leader of the team, the man responsible for the plans, the disguises, and the clever schemes that kept everyone alive, episode after episode. For a while, it seemed like his character would always be the face of the show. But the arrival of another performer would slowly change the balance of power. Mr. T. He was hired to play the tough gold chain-wearing mechanic named B.A. Baracus. Nobody, it seems, expected what happened next. Suddenly, this new performer was not just playing a character, he was becoming a phenomenon all on his own. Explore the reported tension between Peppard and Mr. T, and try to separate the confirmed facts from the stories that reportedly grew bigger and stranger through years of retelling. Sources describe 2 very different personalities forced to share one set, one spotlight, and one growing fan base, because the A-Team had been built from the very beginning around one clear leader. But audiences, week after week, were beginning to notice another star rising fast, and even the producers could not look away. That rising star had walked onto the set as a newcomer and was about to leave it as something else entirely. The man who walked onto the set and became a superstar. Before Mr. T became B.A. Baracus, he was already known, but not as a television actor. He had built a name for himself through his unique look, his deep gravel voice, and his powerful personality. The gold chains, the mohawk, the muscles, all of it made him instantly recognizable, even to people who had never seen him act. Producers reportedly saw something special in him, something they believed audiences had never seen before on a weekly television show. But the real turning point came the moment audiences actually met B.A. He was intimidating, with a stare that could stop an argument before it started. He was funny, delivering lines with a kind of energy nobody else on television had. He was loyal, always ready to protect his team no matter the danger. And strangely, he was terrified of one thing that seemed almost impossible for a man built like him to fear: flying. This one detail, according to fans and reporters at the time, made B.A. feel human. He could fight anyone, build anything, and survive impossible situations. But the moment a plane took off, he became someone audiences could actually relate to. Explore how Mr. T reportedly took this character and turned him into far more than a supporting role. Explore how, episode after episode, B.A. slowly became one of the most talked about personalities on television. Then, look at what happened next, because the character did not stay inside the show for long. B.A. appeared on lunchboxes, he appeared on toys, he appeared on posters, cereal boxes, and countless pieces of merchandise that filled store shelves across the country. Mr. T, reportedly almost overnight, had become a cultural phenomenon, recognized by children and adults alike. But fame, this large, allegedly, came with a price. Being more famous than the show itself created pressure that few actors ever have to face. Sources describe a strange and difficult balancing act, staying true to a character while also becoming a brand, a toy, and a household name all at once. And soon, the man behind the mohawk would have to figure out how to live inside a spotlight that seemed to only keep growing brighter. But B.A. was not the only member of the team hiding something unexpected behind the scenes. His loudest rival on set was not an enemy, and not a stranger, but another member of the A-Team, a man whose mind worked in a way that nobody could ever fully follow. The secret behind the A-Team's most famous character, Howling Mad Murdoch, was never meant to be an ordinary character. He was the team's pilot, capable of flying almost anything with wings or blades. But he was also, without question, the most unpredictable member of the entire group. Nobody, not even his closest teammates, ever seemed fully sure what he was about to do next. He was strange, often slipping into conversations with people who were not even there. He was funny, turning even the most dangerous missions into moments of pure comic relief. And somehow, underneath all of that unpredictable energy, he became one of the most important pieces holding the entire team together. Behind Murdoch stood actor Dwight Schultz, a performer who reportedly had to walk a very careful line between comedy and something closer to real instability. Lean too far into silliness, and the character risked becoming a cartoon. Lean too far into realism, and the character risked becoming uncomfortable to watch. Sources describe Schultz working hard, episode after episode, to keep that balance just right. Schultz reportedly built this character from nothing into one of the most beloved figures on the show. Murdoch became such a key part of the series' overall chemistry. Without him, some argue the team would have felt far too serious, far too rigid, and far less fun to watch. Then look closely at Murdoch's strange, often loud relationship with B.A. Their constant arguments became one of the show's most beloved running jokes, repeated in some form almost every single episode. B.A. hated flying with everything in him. Murdoch somehow was always the one forced to fly him anyway, usually relying on strange tricks, disguises, or outright deception just to get him safely onto the plane. But underneath all the yelling and comedy was something far more meaningful. The two characters, in a strange and unexpected way, needed each other completely. Murdoch reportedly brought out a softer, more human side of B.A. that no other character on the show could reach. And B.A., in turn, gave Murdoch someone steady and grounded to bounce his chaos off of. Together, According to longtime fans, they helped the entire team feel less like a group of co-workers thrown together by circumstance and more like an actual family bound by loyalty. This uneven, unlikely friendship became one of the emotional anchors of the entire series, something audiences reportedly looked forward to in almost every episode. But not every member of the team carried this same kind of chaotic energy. One man on the team relied on something completely different: charm, style, and a talent for getting exactly what the team needed, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. Face, the man who could talk his way out of anything. Templeton Faceman Peck was, without question, the smoothest operator on the entire team. While Hannibal built the plans and B.A. built the machines, Face was the man who somehow turned the impossible into something completely achievable. If the team needed a car, a disguise, official paperwork, or an entirely fake identity, Face was reportedly the one who could make it appear seemingly out of thin air. He could lie without hesitation. He could charm almost anyone into helping him, regardless of the situation. He could manipulate circumstances until they bent entirely in his favor. And somehow, no matter how difficult or dangerous the mission became, he could always find exactly what the team needed to succeed. Actor Dirk Benedict reportedly brought a distinctly different kind of energy to the series compared to his co-stars. His version of Face often seemed far more at ease, surrounded by beautiful women and expensive clothing, than standing in the middle of a tense military operation. This contrast, according to longtime fans, became one of the character's most defining and memorable traits. Explore the chemistry between Face and the rest of the team, and how Benedict's performance reportedly helped balance the show's mix of action, humor, and charm. Without his confident, easygoing energy, some argue, the series would have leaned far too heavily into pure military drama, losing much of the personality that made it stand out. Face also represented something the rest of the team lacked: a certain smoothness that let the group blend into ordinary society when needed, even while running from the law. But while Face was busy charming his way out of danger on screen, the entire cast, allegedly, was facing a very different kind of challenge behind the scenes. They had to film a television show where almost every single episode ended in a massive, high-stakes explosion, and somehow, according to the show's now famous reputation, nobody involved was ever supposed to get seriously hurt in the process. This strange, almost impossible balancing act between staged chaos and real-world safety was quietly becoming one of the most talked-about mysteries surrounding the entire production. Behind every gunfight, every crash, and every fireball captured on camera was a much bigger story, one involving real risk, real pressure, and a production team working harder than audiences at home could have ever imagined. The most violent show where almost nobody died. On the surface, the A-Team looked like one of the most dangerous shows on television. Guns fired constantly, filling almost every episode with the sound of gunfire echoing across warehouses, farms, and deserted streets. Cars flipped, skidded, and crashed into walls almost every single week, often leaving behind twisted metal and clouds of smoke. Buildings exploded, sometimes more than once before the credits even rolled, lighting up the screen in bursts of orange and black. Helicopters spun out of control and dropped from the sky in clouds of smoke, crashing in ways that looked utterly catastrophic. And yet, somehow, through all of this chaos, the characters almost always walked away without a single serious injury. This strange contrast became one of the show's most talked-about features, something fans and critics reportedly noticed almost immediately after the series first aired. Explore the well-known theory, repeated for decades by fans and television historians alike, that the show's action was reportedly built on purpose to look far more dangerous than it actually was. According to some estimates passed around online over the years, thousands of gunshots were fired across the show's entire run, yet almost nobody on screen was ever shown getting hurt in any serious or lasting way. The team would show up somewhere remote, often an old warehouse, a dusty farm, or an abandoned industrial lot on the edge of town. They would be badly outnumbered, facing armed men with nothing but their van and whatever spare tools happened to be lying around the location. Victory would seem completely out of reach, at least for the first few minutes of the episode. Then Hannibal would smile. That smile became legendary among longtime fans because everyone watching already knew exactly what came next, without needing a single word of explanation. The plan was starting. Suddenly, scrap metal became armor. Old barrels became barricades. Simple farm tools became something closer to weapons of war. Everyday objects that seemed useless moments earlier were transformed almost instantly into exactly what the team needed to survive. Regular vehicles were rebuilt into makeshift war machines, constructed in what felt like only minutes, using nothing but instinct, teamwork, and imagination. The whole location turned into a giant puzzle, one the team always seemed to solve at the very last possible second, just as the danger reached its peak. This pattern, repeated across countless episodes, reportedly became part of what made the show so addictive to watch, week after week, for millions of viewers. It was never really about the danger itself. Some longtime fans argue it was about watching four unlikely underdogs turn a hopeless situation into a clever, satisfying victory. But behind the cameras, something far less polished was reportedly happening on set. The actors were not always working from a safe distance, tucked away behind careful special effects. At times, they were physically present for stunts that carried very real risk to their safety. Explosions went off close by, filling the air with heat and noise. Vehicles moved at genuine speed across uneven ground. A single miscalculation on a set built around this much chaos could have led to genuine disaster for anyone standing nearby. And according to reports from people involved with the production at the time, things did not always go exactly as planned during filming. The gap between a carefully staged illusion and an actual accident was often much thinner than anyone watching comfortably from home could have ever guessed. Behind every explosion that looked perfectly timed was a crew working under intense pressure, trying to keep a genuinely dangerous show from turning into a real-life tragedy. When the explosions were real, the A-Team earned its reputation through action, but large-scale action on television, especially at this level, never comes without real danger attached to it. Explore the world reportedly hidden behind the show's biggest stunts, its explosions, its vehicle crashes, and its most elaborate sequences. Behind every dramatic moment stood a team of stunt coordinators and pyrotechnic experts, working carefully to create the appearance of chaos without causing actual harm to anyone involved. Separate the real production dangers from the myths that reportedly grew bigger with every retelling over the years. Some stories became exaggerated as fans passed them along at conventions and in magazines, while others, according to people who actually worked on set, turned out to be completely true. Show what it truly took to build the illusion of a team constantly facing impossible odds. Explosions needed exact timing down to the second. Crashes needed precise angles calculated well before cameras ever rolled. Actors needed to hit specific marks within inches, all while the clock ticked under a demanding television schedule that left little room for error. This is also where the now famous black GMC van reportedly earns its place as a character all its own. The van was never just a way for the team to get from one place to another. It became a symbol, instantly recognized by millions of viewers everywhere across the country. The second that van appeared on screen, audiences knew, without a single word needed, that the A-Team had arrived. Toy versions of the van reportedly sold by the millions in stores nationwide. Posters of it hung on bedroom walls for years after the show first aired. For an entire generation, that van became just as iconic as the actors sitting inside it. But as the seasons went on, the team that once seemed completely unbeatable began running into a problem that no plan, no stunt, and no explosion could ever fix. The audience was shifting. Television itself was shifting. New shows, new formats, and new viewer habits were reportedly reshaping the entire industry around them, faster than anyone at the network seemed prepared for. Slowly, the exact magic that had once made the A-Team a phenomenon began to fade from episode to episode. What had once felt fresh and exciting was starting to feel familiar. And in television, familiar can quietly become a warning sign nobody wants to admit out loud. The show that once ruled its time slot without effort was now facing quiet pressure from every direction, both in front of the camera and behind it, as everyone involved wondered how much longer the magic could really last. When the dream began to fall apart at its peak, the A-Team looked completely untouchable. But holding on to success, especially in television, is often far harder than reaching it in the first place. The show reportedly began shifting, slowly at first, then more noticeably with each passing season. What had once felt like a brand new formula was starting to feel familiar to viewers who had already seen the team pull off the same kind of clever escape dozens of times before. New characters were introduced, brought in as an attempt to freshen up a formula that once felt unstoppable. Some of these additions, according to fans at the time, never quite connected with audiences the way the original four had. The overall structure of episodes was adjusted, reportedly in hopes of winning back viewers who were slowly slipping away week by week. Producers experimented with different tones, different pacing, and different kinds of missions, trying to find whatever spark had made the earlier seasons feel so exciting. The stories themselves started to feel different, shifting in tone in ways that many longtime fans reportedly did not connect with as strongly as before. Some episodes leaned more heavily into comedy, while others tried to bring in more serious drama, and neither direction, according to critics at the time, fully satisfied the audience that had made the show a hit in the first place. And the audience that once could not wait for each new episode began, according to the ratings of the time, to quietly drift toward other shows filling the schedule. Explore the reported decline of the series and the growing pressure facing both the cast and the people running the show behind the scenes. Sources describe rising tension as everyone involved searched for a way to save something that had once seemed impossible to break. Look closely at how the characters reportedly changed during these later years, and why the show struggled to recapture the same energy that made its early seasons so memorable. Some fans argue that once certain changes were made, that original spark never fully returned, no matter how many new ideas were introduced. The team that had once escaped any trap, outsmarted any enemy, and survived any explosion now found itself facing something far more powerful than any villain from the show. Changing television. Networks were adjusting their strategies. Viewers wanted something newer, and the series that once defined an entire era of action television was struggling to keep pace with an industry moving faster than even Hannibal could have planned for. Behind the scenes, reportedly, the pressure was mounting on everyone involved, from the writers searching for new ideas to the actors wondering how much longer their characters would remain on the air. According to the show's own history, the final mission was already approaching, one that no clever scheme and no last-second plan would ever be able to reverse. The end was coming quietly, long before most viewers at home ever noticed it creeping closer. The day the A-Team finally lost. For years, it seemed like nothing could ever truly defeat the A-Team. Hannibal always had a plan, no matter how impossible the situation looked at first glance. BA always had the strength, ready to build, fight, or push through whatever stood in the team's way. Face always had the connections, able to find whatever the mission required, even at the very last moment. And Murdoch always had a way to fly them out, no matter how dangerous the escape seemed. But there was one enemy, according to the show's own history, that none of them could ever truly defeat: time. By the mid-1980s, television itself was reportedly shifting in ways the show could not fully keep up with. New series were appearing with different styles, different pacing, and different expectations from a changing audience. What once felt fresh and exciting slowly began to feel like something viewers had already seen before, week after week. Explore the reported final years of the series and the difficult decision behind bringing such a massive cultural phenomenon to an end. Sources describe a production team trying everything possible, adjusting characters, adjusting tone, and adjusting entire storylines, all in hopes of recapturing the excitement that had defined the earlier seasons. But according to many longtime fans, that original magic never fully returned, no matter how hard everyone involved reportedly tried. Look closely at what happened to the cast as the show approached its final episodes. For 4 actors who had spent years living inside these characters, the ending meant stepping away from roles that had shaped much of their careers and much of their public identities. George Peppard, Mr. T, Dirk Benedict, and Dwight Schultz, each in different ways, reportedly had to face life after the A-Team. A life without gunfights, disguises, elaborate escape plans, or a rebuilt black van waiting just off camera. For millions of viewers who had grown up watching the team escape one impossible situation after another, the ending felt like the closing of an entire era in television. No more Hannibal smiling right before a plan began. No more Face charming his way past danger with nothing but confidence. No more Murdoch's chaotic energy lighting up the screen episode after episode. No more BA fearless against enemies twice his size, yet completely terrified the moment a plane left the ground. But according to the story that followed, the A-Team was not actually finished, because something unexpected reportedly happened in the years after the show ended. The series refused to simply disappear. Reruns kept the characters alive on television screens long after new episodes stopped airing. Merchandise reportedly kept selling for years, and an entire generation kept quoting the show's most famous lines, long after the original broadcast had already gone quiet. The team that had once seemed unstoppable inside the story had, in a strange way, become unstoppable outside of it as well. And decades later, something far bigger was reportedly waiting on the horizon, a return that almost nobody watching back then could have ever expected. What really happened to the A-Team? This is a story of 4 men who became legends far beyond the television screen. George Peppard, Mr. T, Dirk Benedict, Dwight Schultz. According to reports over the years, their lives after the show took very different paths, each shaped by the same strange challenge: learning how to live in the shadow of characters far more famous than almost anything else they would ever do. Some reportedly continued acting, searching for roles that could stand apart from the characters audiences already loved so deeply. For Peppard, this reportedly meant taking on new projects while still being recognized wherever he went as the cigar-smoking leader who always had a plan. Some became television personalities in their own right, using their fame from the show to build entirely new careers outside of scripted drama. Mr. T, in particular, reportedly leaned into his larger-than-life public image, becoming a recognizable figure in commercials, cartoons, and public appearances for years after the show ended. Some, according to sources close to the productions, struggled quietly with the pressure that came from being forever tied to a single unforgettable role. Being loved by millions as one character, some actors have said, can make it difficult to ever be seen as anyone else. And some discovered that escaping the shadow of the A-Team was, in the end, almost impossible, no matter how many years passed or how many new projects followed. Then comes the final twist in this story. Decades after the original series ended, Hollywood reportedly returned to the A-Team, a new movie, a new cast, an entirely new generation of viewers, many of whom had never even seen a single episode of the original series growing up. The new film reportedly tried to capture the same spirit of clever plans, unlikely heroism, and larger-than-life characters that had made the original show so beloved decades earlier. But one question remained, repeated by longtime fans everywhere the moment the new film was announced. Could anyone really replace the original team? New actors could learn the lines, wear the costumes, and recreate the explosions, but many fans reportedly felt that something about the original chemistry could never truly be copied. Because the A-Team, according to nearly everyone who grew up watching it, was never really just about four men riding around in a black van. It was about a moment in television history when four characters became so powerful that they reportedly escaped the screen entirely and became part of popular culture itself, appearing on toys, lunchboxes, and posters long after the cameras stopped rolling. Hannibal, B.A. Murdoch. Four fugitives, according to the story that started it all. Four legends, according to everyone who watched them. And a team that, even decades later, people still love to see when, against every possible odd, a plan finally comes together. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another exclusive reveal.